Gavin P asks today, how do we find the endpoint of a line segment given already a midpoint and the other endpoint? And this problem actually asks us to solve it using the midpoint formula. So we're going to do that. And this is good because I actually have a lot of students who confuse the midpoint formula or parts of it with parts of the distance formula. Do I add coordinates? Do I subtract them? I want to make it very simple and clear because it really is a simple and clear concept. And then I want to show you, using that same sense of intuition, how to solve the problem without the formula. So you can either check it with the formula or check it using an intuitive sense, however you want to do it. But let's start here. So let's say I want to find the average height between two cats, all right, cheetahs and tigers. And to do so, what I need is very simple. I just need to know the height of the cheetah and the height of the tiger. If I then add those two heights together and then divide by 2, that's the number that I'm considering, then I'm going to get a height right here in the middle. It tells me the average height between these two things, between these two cats in this case. The same thing is no less true for the midpoint. So to best remember the midpoint formula, let's do this. I'm going to share my screen. All right, I've gone on and drawn the line or the line segment, I should say, that's being considered. Here's the midpoint. Here are the two other points. So it's as simple as this. Let's start with height because that's what we saw with the cats. In this case, I can just think of the heights as a y coordinate here. In this case, we'll say y1. And then I want the midpoint, the average between that and this point down here, my y2, so to speak. The same is no less true for x. So here's one x, here's another x. Let's call this my x1, my x2. It's just height on its side, its length. So what do? I want the midpoint, I want the middle point between these two x's to give me this x up here. Let's call it x sub m. And to do that, I'm just going to do x sub 1 plus x sub 2. That is my two heights or length points, I can say, divided by 2. That'll give me x sub n, the midpoint or the x coordinate to my midpoint. Same for y, no less different. It's no less easy or simple. That made no sense. Anyway, so y sub 1 plus y sub 2 divided by 2 will give me the y coordinate to my midpoint. So there we go. Now, this is the midpoint formula, but let's make it formulaic. Let's actually write it. So we're saying that the midpoint, which is going to be a point, so let me put it in point form, is going to be the average of my x's, because this is where the x's go. It's where my x coordinates go. And the average between my two known y points or endpoints, y coordinates for my endpoints. That's it. That's it. So, and I can even think of this as my x sub m, y sub m, if that's an easier way to visualize that. But that's all the midpoint is. There's no subtraction. None of that stuff is going on. But then how do I solve? You may say, well, I have the midpoint. How is this useful to me? Let's just plug stuff in and solve for the unknowns, just as we would for anything. So here, x sub m, we know the midpoint, the x coordinate for the midpoint is -7, and the y is 20. Let's make that equal to my averages. So I don't know, of course, what x sub 1 is. That's the part that's missing. But I do know what x sub 2 is. x2 is -10. And I'm just going to divide by 2 to get that. Same for the y's. I don't know what y1 is, but I do know that y2 is 18. Divide by half, and I would get my midpoint y coordinate. So independently, if I solve for these independently, I'll have set up the equations necessary to solve for the missing coordinates. So y sub 1 plus 18 divided by 2 is going to be equal to 20. And likewise, x sub 1, we'll say -10 plus -10 divided by 2 is equal to -7. So if I multiply both sides of this by 2, I'll get x, I'm just going to say x minus 10 is equal to -14. Add 10 to both sides, I'll get -4 for x. And for y, likewise, multiply both sides by 2. I'll get y plus 18 is equal to 40. Subtract 18 from both sides. it must be equal to 22. That is my endpoint, -4, 22. Now that's great. That's fantastic. So we know how to use the formula to do it. You can end watching this video here, or you can think about it this way, much more intuitive. Think about slope. It's a line after all. It's a type of line or a line segment. So it's going to have a slope. And if I go and figure out what rise is here to get from -10, or sorry, to get from 18 to 20, I go up by 2. And then how do I get from -10 to -7 on X? Well, I go over by 3. Then the same is going to be true here for this coordinate. I'm going to go up by 2 and over by 3. Because remember that the midpoint is we can basically define the midpoint as the point on the line segment on either side of which the two line segment parts are equidistant. So we can say this part here is equal to this part here. They have the same slope all the way up. So no matter what, this is going to be true, that this slope and this slope are the same. So if we add 2 to 20, we go up by 2, we get 22. If we go over by 3 from -7, we'll be going in the positive direction. We'll get -4. So that checks out just fine. You can use that to check your work, or think of it as a much faster, easier way of solving the problem to begin with. So hopefully, Gavin, that helps. And if you would like any more service, please be sure to get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to help you out. Have a great day.